Hi guys, hope you're keeping safe and well and secure in this lockdown situation. So continuing the series of Brown Car Guy and Buddies, I'm today going to catch up with another good friend of mine, Tom Conway-Gordon. I've known him for well over a decade. He's a PR professional. He's from the UK, moved out to Dubai, and I got to know him and stuff that he was doing there. He's a good friend, good supporter, and so he moved back to the UK I think a year or two before I did, and he sort of re-established himself here. And it'll be fascinating to discuss the sort of unique challenges and the unique aspects of automotive PR in the Middle East with him, and also to touch on the situation with this lockdown, because I think he has a unique insight into this. So this will be an amazing conversation. Stay tuned for that. Before we get into it, make sure that you are subscribing to this channel. Hit that notification bell icon as well so you get updates of all the uploads that I put up. Follow me on social media. Just search for hashtag Brown Car Guy. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, also on browncarguy.com. And there's some really interesting content in another place, which I'll tell you about at the end of this video. So here we go. Hey Tom, how you doing? Great to see you, buddy. All good with you?
I'm really well, thanks, Azad. Really good to see you. Really nice to really look forward to our chat today. Yeah, it's been crazy times at the moment, obviously.
Oh man, seriously, this lockdown. I mean, how are you coping with this? What have you been up to? Have you been working from home and stuff?
Yeah, I've been working like crazy, to be honest. Just so you know, I work in issues and crisis public relations, and obviously this is probably the biggest issue and crisis the world's ever faced in living memory. And you know, it's
exactly. So is that to do with, like, you know, how people are coping with this situation and stuff like that? Is that sort of stuff that you would look at?
Yeah, for sure. I think you know, it's just a quick aside. It kind of feels like I've trained 20 years for this moment in my career.
Wow.
So it's kind of, you know, that kind of cheesy movie line like that. I kind of trained 20 years for this. So it's kind of
I was made for this.
Yeah, I'm trained for this. I worked really hard. And we'll talk about some of my experience.
You need like a scar and like a cigar sticking out.
Yeah,
you know, you come in with an eye patch. You know, it's
exactly.
Like, call Tom, we need him back. One last mission. I was made for this.
Yeah, like Rambo. Exactly. But yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, it was a weird thing to come back and work from home again. Because when I came back from Dubai, it quite unsettling anyway to come back, and I spent
Tell me about it.
Trying to get my whole life sorted. You know what it's like, very discombobulating. So to kind of be home, and again, when the last time I was working from home was very much like trying to sort my life out, get my career back on track, that sort of stuff. So when I had that first kind of week of, right, you're going back home again, it's like, God, kind of it's like ghosts of the last time I was here.
So you're like, but I just got out of there.
No, exactly. I've just been in my job about just over almost a year now, and it's like, oh God, I'm going back home. So there was a bit of a. But actually, there was so much work to do, and so I've just been really getting on with it, and it's been great to be busy. I mean, I feel very grateful for where I am and how I'm working. I'm pleased. I feel very lucky that I haven't been furloughed. I think I'd probably get bored to tears if I didn't have work to do. I think working really hard is rewarding, but it also kind of helps the clock tick faster. You know, weeks are flying by. Well, it's 7 weeks of lockdown now.
I mean, to be honest, it's like, you know, when this happened, everybody was like signing up to courses, and they think they got lots of time and stuff. And then you realize, like, where did the day go? You know, especially now in Ramadan, because we're fasting, and it's like, well, it's Suri, and then now it's iftar, and now it's 10 o'clock. And it's like, well, what happened? You know, the day is just gone, you know. So, yeah, the time goes really quickly. But I guess, I mean, it's not something that's spoken about a lot, certainly not in my content that I put out. But the whole issue with mentally coping with this scenario is very difficult for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I mean, I've written about my personal battles with mental illness and anxiety and depression, that sort of stuff. So I can kind of relate to how people are feeling. And it is that kind of isolation, literally. It's, you know, with humans, we need contact. We want to be hugged. We want to see people. We want to have conversations, whether it's about the weather or whether it's about something more serious. And I think it's something more stimulating and intriguing. And I think I read something somewhere that, you know, the people are having much more vivid dreams. They're kind of having this stimulation when they're asleep.
Interesting.
Because they're missing that stimulation from getting on the tube, or certainly for Londoners anyway, getting on the tube, seeing their friends, going to the pub, busy, lots of people around, hectic, stimulus. And when it you kind of narrow that kind of corridor of mentality, as it were.
Yeah.
I think, that's when the brain's like, oh, I need something, so I'm going to, play tricks on myself when I'm asleep.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I thought that was quite quirky, quite fun. And
To be
yes,
honest, now that you mention it, that strikes a chord. Actually, I think I think I have experienced that a little bit. That's bizarre. I just thought because I was sleeping too much, maybe that's what it was.
No, that's what it is. I was intrigued by that, and I kind of, obviously, I devour media because it's my job, and I need to know what's going on, who's saying what about this and the other. So, that picked up, and that was kind of quite interesting.
So before we move on to the main topic, which obviously is automotive, so your quick tips for people that are in this situation from that side of things, just having to cope with it. You got any advice or tips?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a routine is good, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be, every hour on the hour, but kind of a waking routine, whatever that is. I wake up, I take some CBD oil personally. I take some vitamin D because we're not allowed outside much.
Yeah, that's something I realized. Yeah. I've started doing that as well because, exactly. Lack of sun. People don't realize how much it affects you. Yeah, go on.
Absolutely. So I do that, and then I kind of, and then I'll have to do some stretches, that sort of stuff, and I'm quite fit, and I find exercise very helpful. Try to have some structure to your day. I think that, I write a to-do list every day, not just for the work I have to do, but kind of like, right, I'm going to set the intention. I'm going to make sure that at 6:30, I'm going to clock off work. I'm going to go into the garden or my bedroom and do a workout, whether that's just body weight, press ups, got some dumbbells. But I've already looking forward to knowing what I'm going to do in the day. Yeah. So I try not to ever be that sort of, like when you're a kid, I'm like, oh, I'm bored, I've got nothing to do, what should I do, I'm not inspired, I find kind of putting activities in that are fun, that I find rewarding, or it doesn't have to be as testing as, right, I'm going to learn a course, or I'm going to learn another new language, which can be quite a big commitment, quite a big goal. But it's about, on a day-to-day basis, I think that's it. On a day-to-day basis, take it as it comes. But having that little bit of foresight for what you're going to do in that day. There might be some work you need to do. There might be a kind of boring task you've been procrastinating about. And it's been weeks now. It's like, just get it done. Just go and say, right, today's the day I'm going to get it done. And then, you feel so much better anyway because you've achieved something.
Yeah, sense of purpose, sense of achievement, that sort of thing. Just giving yourself, just keeping your mind and your body occupied.
Yeah, exactly. I think walking is absolutely essential. We've been told half an hour. Get out and use a half an hour, even if it's walking around the block 5 times. But get into nature, get into fresh air. Look up, look at the sky, look at the trees, breathe in the air. It all sounds very simple and kind of new wave, whatever. But it's so important. Your body needs oxygen, your body needs stimulus, and all that sort of stuff. I find that's very good. And one final tip on that is, even if you do, I always first thing in the morning, I always make my bed.
Yes.
I think there was a Marine sergeant who said in one of his big speeches.
Yes. That's right.
The important thing to do is make your bed.
Yeah.
And it really is. You kind of, because even if you do nothing for the rest of the day, you've done something.
That's it. So, make your bed, and get dressed.
That's
the other thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that's really good advice.
Little achievements. They don't need to be big things.
Little victories keep you going. That's it, isn't it? Exactly. Yeah. So you've touched on something there with the environment and stuff now, and that's quite key. And it kind of, I'm going to segue that into what we're going to be talking about, which obviously was automotive. Sure. But last night, me and the wife were looking out the back window and going, "My goodness, we can see stars!" And we're like in northwest London, and to be able to do that is actually quite remarkable. But that's one of the key things. Like, so when I've been out for walks, and I'm like, wow. The air tastes and smells different, because of the lack of pollution. But on the other hand, that kind of sucks because we are car people, and and that's where we come from. And so where did we meet? We met in Dubai. When was that? The Camaro event that we met at, or was that before that?
I think the first time we kind of looked upon each other and shook hands was at the Chevrolet Camaro launch in June 2009.
2009, yeah. Wow.
First week of June 2009.
Yeah. So you started off here. You were already in the PR arena, and then you told me you were headhunted to Dubai.
Yeah, very much so. I started my PR career about 20 years ago, kind of January 2000, and the whole new millennium, new Tom, new career, new life, all that sort of stuff. And I cut my teeth in kind of working with General Motors. Their finance arm, Vauxhall Finance in the UK, and their kind of GM, General Motors Acceptance Corporation, which bit the dust in 2008, but that was their finance arm. It was very much involved in the kind of leasing of cars, the finance of cars, so Vauxhall Finance, that sort of stuff, and then also kind of car supermarkets. That was a brand new thing in those times. So GM was I was involved in everything but the metal, effectively. So that gave me a kind of a rich experience about who GM were.
So were you into cars at the time, or was that, or did you start getting into cars at that point? Because it's interesting. You just said everything but the metal, and there's like a tinge of frustration there.
There was a bit of frustration there, because I've been a car guy. I mean, since I was a kid. You know, I used to go to walk around the street when I was 6, 7, and go, "Oh, that's a Renault 5. Oh, that's a Ford Cortina." You know, I've always loved cars. I'm one of those sort of people. So when I started my career, and kind of always hoping to get into that kind of play with the cars and the car PR or drive them or whatever. But that was close enough, that kind of finance arm. Yeah, it was frustrating. It wasn't it was so close, but not quite there. And you can smell the new car smell, but you're not allowed in it. So
you're like, I'll park the car. I'll just park it. It's fine. Just give me the keys. I'll just park it. It's fine.
But we kind of sold the finance for them. But the thing that kind of kept me going through there, I mean, I was eager to learn. I was 22 or something. I was a kid, didn't know anything. Was the fact that we could get all the car magazines in and subscribe to them. Because that was, I had to read those, and that was, I need to know we wanted Vauxhall Finance to get into these magazines.
For our younger viewers, car magazines are those paper things with covers and backs on them, and they have pictures. They have pictures and text in them. They used to be very popular back in the day. I know that they're not a thing anymore.
You had kind of more flimsy ones. You had ones that came out every week. You had more kind of thicker ones.
I know.
Glossy.
It's quite tragic. I was talking about this the other day with a previous guest, and I was just out of curiosity looking at figures for circulation figures for magazines. And I remember, you take for example Top Gear in its heyday, and I think it was between 500,000 and 750,000 monthly circulation. And now it's still a leading magazine, but now it's 80,000 copies. It's like, wow. Back in the day, it would have been shut down immediately for that. That's incredible. But that's a whole different era. But just the excitement, I suppose. It's like when I used to go to motor shows, I used to collect brochures. Of course, now I don't want to be weighed down at motor shows if I do go. So you got your foot in the door, and you were in PR. I know we're not going to go through every detailed step of what you're doing, but the very unique experience of automotive PR in the Middle East. And I think this is something that we should talk a little bit about, because, I think a lot of people see the Middle East as well, that's a war zone, or it's a backwater, or, it can't be very sophisticated out there. But, I mean, you were in PR here, and then you were in PR there. What did you find that really struck out to you as either being quite well developed or not developed?
I think just to go back to the headhunting, because I had that General Motors experience at the start, that's what took me to Dubai, knowing GM. In terms of looking, just to set the scene for your viewers, but in terms of the kind of PR side of things, it was very fast in Dubai. I mean, Dubai is a very fast market. Everyone's rushing, everyone's everything. Yes, everyone's now. And so it took me a bit of time to adjust to the speed of that. And certainly when I worked with GM, we had a very, very driven client. I worked at the agency. I worked at the agency side, and I was parachuted in to kind of help the team out who were having a tough time, the business, whatever. So we had a very demanding client, and so it her standards were very high. And so trying to kind of bring a team up who are kind of being controlled to a certain extent by this client. And kind of protect them. They'd kind of lost their confidence. They had lost their leadership, that sort of stuff. So I found it was a very kind of fast start. It was very wow, okay, this isn't what you told me in the interview. But this wasn't quite
literally jumping into the deep end and learning to swim as you go, sort of thing.
Absolutely, and I think you always want to do that in every job. But it was kind of like, what is really kind of there's deep, and then there's a kind of Mariana Trench deep, and it's like, whoa, it's really quite deep. I think. But it was what I liked about the variety of PR there was in the Middle East was that you had a very big team, a very big team on GM, a lot of personalities, a lot of it took a bit of time to figure out how big and who those people were and what their role was on this account, how it was going to work. and the team, and then also how that team gelled with the agency. The account at the time, General Motors, was a very big PR account, biggest in the region.
It is. Yeah, it's massive. Yeah,
paying a lot of money. They had a big, huge amount of brands, a lot of corporate, ANSIA, so paying us a lot of money. And so to come in and kind of have to fix this problem quite quickly was, that was a kind of, I would say, a rude awakening, but it was wow. Okay, welcome to Dubai. You got to get going.
So when you say coming in and having to fix the problem, I mean, what exactly was the issue, if you're able to say?
I think as I said, we had a very demanding, very kind of, I wouldn't say tough because that would be unfair, but demanding client who set very high standards, as one would.
Yeah.
You're paying a hefty 5 figures a month US for this. You've got what you expect.
And to put it into perspective for people, to put it into context, this is one of the biggest manufacturer dealer network in the region. Across several brands, so it's not just like, one brand. It's like, we've got Chevrolet at the time. You had Hummer, and I see one just over your right shoulder there, and a whole bunch of other brands, the GMC and all the rest of it. So it's a big outfit, a big sort of, one would say a big lumbering machine, so to try and get that back on course, I guess that's a task.
And so you had, the brands you mentioned, Chevrolet, GMC, Cadillac, Hummer, Saab at the time, and then you had AC Delco, which is their kind of used parts. And then you had the corporate business, and then some kind of CSR, corporate social responsibility. But also when I arrived, it was kind of 2008, 2009. So GM US, this was having a big trouble of the big three going to the wall with Ford and Chrysler. You had the bailouts, you had the TARP funds. So obviously GM Middle East is a very separate entity from GM US. But when you've got a backdrop of global headlines saying GM in trouble, GM needing bailout, and then you add into the fact that General Motors has been in the Middle East since, for 84 years, part of the fabric of the Middle East, the gyms, the GMCs, the off-road cars, very popular in Saudi Arabia. So you've got this kind of juxtaposition of a lot of things need to be doing. We need to kind of keep General Motors Middle East needs to separate itself from the kind of bad news of what's happening in the US, but also by pushing out new cars, exciting new models, keep it's business as usual here, but you've got that sort of spectre in the background of what's going to happen, and when that kind of built up into June of that year, in kind of the chapter 11. And so that's when I talk about when I work in issues and crisis, leading General Motors Middle East through that issues and crisis. That global bankruptcy problem was hugely influential to my career. I still use the lessons I learned then very much almost every day today, and I kind of thank the client that I worked with at the time who drove us, and we had a very good relationship to kind of save GM in the Middle East and its reputation and protect it by pushing out these incredible models.
So it's interesting that you talk about that. I mean, of course, we're now looking at a scenario where the industries around the world, aviation, whatever, they're all on their knees right now. And everybody's looking at, well, what is going to happen? They're talking about potentially, the deepest recession the UK has had in history, as far as they can look back, And of course, the car industry is on its knees. I mean, I put up an article the other day about, sales in April being 97.3% down, and it's going to take a while for consumer confidence to return, for factories to start up again. So based on what you learned at the time, if you were in a sage-like position where the industry was coming to you and saying, Tom, how do we get out of this? What do we do? What would be your sort of, say 3 key things?
I mean, it's quite a tough question.
It is. It's literally the $1 million question,
I think the car industry, as you've said, I work with consumer brands. I work with Adidas, and they're sort of 97% down, 95% down. That's kind of commonplace across the world. There's no consumer confidence. No one's worried. Everyone's worried about where their money's going to come from. They certainly can't kind of afford it on luxuries like, the trainers and new cars, which is obviously the second biggest expense they're going to make. But I think what the car industry specifically should do now is use this time to figure out how it's going to reposition itself. I think this what's happening in COVID across the world is a correction, a reset, an opportunity to take stock about positively, negatively, the whole thing, people's lives, in business, in industry, pollution, whatever it is. And I think those brands that are now figuring out what the future looks like and really kind of looking at the data. I think their data is ubiquitous, really knowing their customer and what they want. And I think the car industry has, I won't say been lazy, but because it's a very sexy industry. It's cool cars, we make cool stuff, come and buy it. Yeah, cool, it's a new one, come and get it. That's all that sort of kind of chips in the bank, as it were, are now gone. So I think and the expensive cars, and obviously the pollution question you talked about earlier, is electric the only way forward? I think eventually yes, but for the petrol heads like you and I, we still want to hear the rumble of a V8, the burble of a V4 now. There's still the market for that, very much so.
So you said something there. Let me pull you up on that, because you talked about our car is still cool, and I think one of the things that we're looking at now is an increasing interest because of this situation. I mean, they're talking about, and I keep quoting these figures in these interviews, but 48% of people that use the public transport are like, they don't want to use it again. 56% of people with licenses that didn't own a car now want to own a car. So suddenly there is this renewed interest in cars, which on the one hand, I'm quite excited about, because I think that's a little bit of hope, the reason for optimism there, that actually people might start, the car has been demonized for so long, and maybe some of that is going to be lifted off the car, and people are going to be like, no, cars are cool again. You think that's cars are the new black?
I do. I got the new black. I reminds me. I love black. I post on my Instagram about any color so long as it's black.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. What's the hashtag?
Whenever I see a cool car, and that's why the H1's black.
Yeah.
But our cars, I think what cars, people are going to kind of seek solace in cars because it's protection. I'm not sitting next to a stranger. It might be coughing. They're not they're isolating machines ultimately.
Yeah.
But what's certainly for London, I think that's there are going to be, but London can't cope with hundreds more cars. They're trying to London's trying to move into more bicycles and cycling, that sort of stuff. But that's not to say that cars around the world aren't going to do that. I think now's the opportunity to kind of merge that desire for people to be safe in their cars. I'm not talking about if they crash into someone else. I'm isolated. I'm in my bubble, and how that mixes with how they can, they can use the car, what the regulations are, how can they actually get around? Because if we all go into our cars, we're not going to go anywhere. We're just going to kind of go to the end of the road and sit in traffic and be like, do this, certainly in London anyway. And I think, but I don't think, looking about the electric side of things, what struck me when I came back from Dubai was the amount of Priuses around, and they're electric. All Uber drivers.
They're all Ubers,
they're all Uber drivers, and good for them. But I think that there are a lot of those around. So if you were to kind of triple, quadruple the amount of Uber drivers or electric cars flying around, it would just kind of clam up again, sadly. I think
it would.
It's a delicate balance as far as I see it between people going to want to go into their cars, but how can they actually do that? Are they going to be able to get in?
That's the tricky question that I think one of many questions that are we're grappling with, and that will need to be answered after we come out of this. There was a survey, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was something like maybe 3 or 4%. I'm probably wrong. I'll put it on the screen later. But recently there was a survey saying that, because there was a number of people who are looking forward to getting back into the cars and getting back to driving, and there was actually a figure. I think it was 3% of people actually looking forward to being stuck in traffic. I'm like, what?
Oh, wow. Well, at least they're safe in their car.
Exactly. Who looks forward to that? But anyway, let's move back to Dubai. And you worked at GM, you worked at Mercedes, and you handled AMG. So from wanting to get your hands on the metal to getting a hold of some serious metal then, right?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, that was the thing. The dream came true. The 5-year-old boy was kind of dream suddenly kind of materialized. I kind of moved agencies to look after Daimler Middle East and Levant, which then became Mercedes-Benz passenger cars. But yes, ultimately Mercedes-Benz. And when obviously I was licking my lips at that opportunity, I was going to be the account lead and really kind of like, we've got to tick the Americans box now we've got some real metal. Now playing with the Germans. Right. And we used to do these the most popular kind of event of the every year would be the AMG Performance Tour.
That's right.
Abu Dhabi as Marina circuit.
I've done a few of those. Yeah.
Yes, I know. All thanks to me.
I appreciate it.
but it's so that was kind of like that was the sort of pinnacle, and you've got all the brand new AMG cars, the C63, the CLS, you know the whole all of them kind of got about 12k on the clock, if not less. So they're brand new, and we'd have 40 media, and they'd come in, and we would as PR we would entertain them, and sit in the cars. And then what was great about Mercedes-Benz and what was great about the client, Frank and Ali and the guys there, was that when you sat in a journalist with a car, you do 2-3 laps, they would drive, and then you'd swap, because it's important that as PR, and we need to know what this feels like. We want to be part of the event. We've got to write this coverage, we've got to write the press, that sort of stuff. So that sort of like, right, here you go, you want to swap around now. It's like, I get to drive this SLS AMG GT around Marina circuit with the world's longest straight. It's like, and that was work.
Yeah, that is when you say like greatest job in the planet, isn't it? Is that sort of thing,
It really is.
But now we've moved on to journalists, right? So I've got to ask you, all right, best and worst journalists. You don't have to name them, but come on.
I remember when I interviewed with Mercedes, the client said that there was this one journalist who's really difficult, really a pain in the constantly griping and all this sort of stuff. And luckily, we never had any dealings with this man. I think we kind of managed him out of the press altogether. But I think there was I think there was a huge variety of guys. There was a lot of egos, obviously, we had to kind of manage. Certainly the more kind of TV guys who were all about, look at me, here I am, blah, blah, blah. So that was, because some of these people had reputations that preceded them. And you listen to the team, as I talked about, had a big team, and they all knew these guys, and they know, oh, this guy behaves like this, and if you don't do this for him, he's going to kick off. And I'm not having any of this nonsense. I'm gonna get to know them one-on-one, and say where we got to know each other, and just kind of understand what their real needs are. Why are they kind of throwing their weight around? Oh, it's because he didn't get this, or why doesn't he work with that videographer? Oh, it's because that happened. Okay, now I understand. So it's all about kind of, as in all relationships, it's about understanding who people are, their character, but also what they really need from, what can I give them that's going to make them feel good, going to make them look good, and going to make them do their job really well. And I think there were no real disasters. I think there was we had one crash once, a minor bump at Yaz and one of these AMG events, when kind of a helmet came off and one of the journalists couldn't see, and it wasn't a disaster. No one was most importantly, no one was hurt. It was just a car at the end of the day. But that was the only sort of that was probably the worst thing that happened. I think what was interesting with GM was the client was hugely protective of their brand, understandably, and the brands and this stuff. So, and whenever a kind of negative or less than, not glowingly positive, but generally kind of negative or really quite negative, or maybe a snippy remark about the handling's pretty rubbish, or the brakes are a bit spongy. This client would get very, very defensive. And so we would be kind of, she can't do that, this journalist can't say that, this is ridiculous. But I think so that was kind of needed a bit of managing there, and certainly with the
so I'm going to jump in there, because I'm probably one of the people that caused that, because I remember, and I know, let's get into specifics, because I remember it was the Camaro. It was actually the Camaro event, because the Camaro was actually a car that I'd been really looking forward to. I was really, really looking forward to it. I love the CSV CR8. You remember that car? That was based on the Holden, and over here we know it as the Vauxhall VXR8, I think. Something like that. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And I knew that the Camaro was going to be based on that same chassis and pretty much had the same engine and stuff like that. And then I drove this thing. And it was a good launch. It was a proper route. Unlike today's launches, it was a full day driving, and it was a proper route. And I knew many of the roads that we were driving on, so I was very familiar with the roads. But when I got back, there was something about the back of that car that had really bothered me. The rebound rate and the suspension of the back just wasn't working. And I was quite fortunate that one of the engineers was on the event, and I sort of cornered him as soon as we got back to the base. And an engineer being an engineer, and unchaperoned as he was at the time, he opened up and he said, yeah, I think you're right. He seemed crestfallen himself, that something wasn't quite right with the car. So I had that on record. And then I went away and I wrote this thing. And of course, I had an email.
I know who it came from. Wasn't me.
No. But to be fair, I think in that instance, it's one of those cases where you turn it around and you turn it into a positive, because my concerns were addressed. They were taken seriously. I was somehow the only person that had raised this issue. And in fact, there was cause to say that, no, there was an issue with the cars on the launch. We will get another car to you. And, you know, to all credit, you guys did. And it was sorted. You know, it was actually a better setup. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that. Now, I know there was a kind of, you wrote slightly iffy piece, but no, that was a really positive. I think that kind of, we had some bad negative coverage, not from you, but another journalist about on another a Chevrolet Traverse launch in January, in which the client had been really quite sharp. Whereas this thing was kind of like, well, let's work with Shazad and let's work with Carmen. He's raised a flag rather than say, oh, you're talking rubbish, Shazad. Well, you don't know anything about anything. Let's kind of work together and turn that around. And I thought that kind of showed a kind of change both in the kind of the running of the account, but the kind of how the clients and that sort of less prickly and more collaborative, and I obviously it was me the go-between between that, and I think from there on in we had very few issues. It reminds me, we had one issue where with the Cadillac CTS-V, which was a hugely powerful sedan, you know, not 63.4.
I love that car.
Miles an hour, 3.9. Really cool, Alcantara, really mean.
Love it.
And I think one of the publications journalists decided to take it to the Autodrome and told us all the clients they were going to take it to the Autodrome and smash it into a wall. And it's like, oh god, airbags blown up.
I think I know who that was and which magazine that was.
But
I won't say. Yeah.
You won't say because you know that's code of PR. We don't want to knife anyone, but there was a very, very tense meeting at General Motors Middle East HQ between the journalist, the publisher, my client, obviously, and the guy who was overseeing the whole test drive. And it was a very sort of tense meeting. And I remember the guy was pouring with sweat, going, "I'm really sorry about this." The publisher was so apologetic. Don't want to stop my relationship with General Motors forever because I need you guys. It's quite funny.
It is crazy. It's crazy. We are over our 30 minutes already. But before we go, we want to talk. I just want to touch on, you know, because we've talked about journalists there, and by the way, I will just add, just to finish that story off, that after we had that thing with the Camaro, I actually had a really good until I left Dubai. I had a fantastic relationship with General Motors, and I think what you said about, because I've often been asked this question regarding PR, is like, what's the most important thing in PR? Is it the press releases? Is it the car launches? Is it the gifts? Is it the goodie bags? And I've always said, no, it's the relationships. That's the most important thing. And, you know, we've had a great relationship over the years, and I've also subsequently had a great relationship with GM, and that always helps. But just quickly, in terms of the scope of media, because of course nowadays we're not just talking journalists, we're talking influencers and other media and lifestyle media. You know, how do you cope with that situation where you got people with different objectives, different needs, different wants, and ultimately different forms of output?
I think, I mean, you've obviously seen the rise of influencers, more kind of in the more latterly, obviously, and you know, people have kind of influencers because they've got eyeballs seem to outweigh journalists who can actually write about product, and I think that balance has been kind of skewed a bit too much. It's just everyone's got to see it, rather than actually what are they going to see, what do they really know about this? And I think that journalism. Is that skill to be able to write about a car and how it performs based on having done that for 10, 5, 15, 20 years, whatever. I think that really holds value, and I think it's vital that, you know, we talked about magazines all collapsing and all this sort of stuff. But but people want to read good stories. They want to read proper copy. In this, this era of fake news and all this nonsense, people want to. You know, motoring journalists are experts. They're going to know how to describe what the burble of the sounds like versus this car versus that car, or what it feels like, and make you kind of, because they know that's what they do. Whereas influencers kind of make it look cool. It's all very on the facade, and I think
that's right.
I think that journalism will never die, and certainly in the automotive space, because petrol heads want to read about what petrol heads have to say about things. And just because we're not able to go on these amazing launches or drive these incredible new cars, we want to feel like we can. And that's why journalists are so vital in that sense. If you want to scroll through Instagram and look at pictures of cool cars that pictures like I take of, oh, here's a black car here. Great, do that. Hashtag cool cars. Bam, you've got all the content in the world. But if you're looking for someone, a real kind of expert who really writes about cars and the story to kind of, it kind of nourishes the kind of my automotive soul in the same sort of way I'm sure it does yours.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I think, you know what? That's perfect. That's a great way to end this, because that's a note of optimism at the end of this. This has been absolutely fantastic, Tom. This has been a great conversation. I think there's a lot of not only fascinating stuff in there, but quite useful and helpful stuff in there as well. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for doing this. And we'll do this.
My pleasure.
Let's do this again soon.
I'd love to. Great to see you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Take care, buddy. All right.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye now.
Whoa, that was a great conversation. Didn't I say that there would be some insightful information? In fact, there was some life coaching in there. Wasn't that fantastic? And of course, a unique insight, a first-hand insight into the mechanism of PR internationally, in fact, not just in the Middle East. And of course, I owned up to occasionally throwing a cog or two into the works myself. But anyway, that was a fun conversation. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments below. Let me know if you managed to catch some of the other conversations and what you think of those. And who else maybe you'd like me to talk to, and what else you'd like to see on this channel. Whilst you're doing that, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, like, comment, share, get other people to subscribe as well. Follow me on social media, search for #BrownCarGuy on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and of course subscribe to browncarguy.com. And whilst you're at it, if you're enjoying this content and you're enjoying these videos, please consider supporting me on patreon.com/Shazad Sheikh. I'll put the link below, and there you'll also find some very exclusive piece of content that is basically my sort of parody sequel of the original Cannonball Run movie. It's a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you thought of it if you get a chance. If not, please just continue to like, share, and comment on this and other content that I'm producing. That's much appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and see you again soon.